Hello, everybody, and welcome to the episode 103. So today, as promised, we are going to share account-based marketing playbooks and share experience of our both companies, Full Funnel and Terminus. Just to give you a quick idea, guys, you all know that we all talk about account-based marketing and different ABM strategies and tactics. And one thing that continuously pops up in the conversation is basically marketing and sales alignment. And this is crucial, especially in account-based marketing, right? We always hear marketing perspective, but we rarely hear sales perspective, right? And how sales look at collaboration with marketing and how they feel marketing can help sales to warm up target accounts, to create awareness inside the buying committee so sales could accelerate the sales cycle and generate opportunities faster. So this is exactly why I invited Jim Gilkey, who is in charge of, who is basically senior account executive at Terminus, account-based marketing software. And we want to share with you the playbooks that work for our companies, share experience that we gained being in trenches, and share a couple of playbooks that you guys can use. Again, feel free to ask any questions in the chat or raise your hand. We'll unmute you so you can join the conversation live. Jim, thanks a lot for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. I am excited for the conversation, and for a little bit of context for all the marketers on this call. I was actually, in my previous role, director of marketing. I was tasked with launching ABM, so I've been in that seat as well, and it has given me a different perspective coming over from marketing to now the sales side on better ways that sales and marketing can work together. So I'm excited to dive into that.
Okay, cool. So as I told you, I want to talk about practical playbooks, and one of the most common questions I hear from people is how to create the playbook. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes still so many B2B companies and B2B marketers have about account-based marketing, that it's all about building a huge list of accounts. Quite often it's a wish list, right? So we want to sell to Fortune 500 companies, upload this list to ABM software, to LinkedIn, target them with display ads, basically with context ads, gated ebooks, right? Track the clicks and downloads, and then send all this context to sales, say, hey, so these are MQLs, now it's your turn to generate opportunities. I would love to hear your approach and how do you create playbooks for ABM campaigns?
Absolutely. I have a few slides and a few quotes that I think should be able to help us out today with this. I think starting with not a real quote, but Henry Ford, when he was creating the Model T, he had said, if I asked the people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And I think a lot of us in marketing, we have such a high goal to generate more pipeline and more opportunities for sales that many of us fall back on, I need more leads. And without looking at contextually, what is the quality of those leads, it often creates a gap between sales and marketing, because with a salesperson, they're very excited to talk to people that are interested, but there's only so many times that they're going to follow up on a lead before they realize that the leads are not high quality and they'll be ignored altogether. So when going through and creating an ABM playbook, it's always important to look at the end goal. You want to ask yourself, what is the business need that we have? And then match with an ABM motion to help to build your initial playbook. And so if you're looking at your business today and deals are taking too long to close, you probably need a pipeline acceleration playbook. If you don't have enough pipeline, obviously building pipeline. If you're losing renewals to your competitors, then a retention play, especially in this economy, we'll talk about a little bit later. retention is becoming the new form of acquisition, and not being invited to evaluations a lot of the time comes from a lack of brand awareness. So looking at which of the business needs your company has, the goals that your company has, and working backwards to align one of the playbooks is my first piece of advice. And Andre, we talked about this on my podcast. The next place you need to go is the metrics. And a lot of people don't think of the metrics until the very, very end of the process. But how do you know if you are winning if you're not keeping score during the game? And so each of these playbooks that we have at Terminus has its own set of KPIs, because a brand awareness campaign is going to have a different output than a retention campaign or a pipeline acceleration campaign. So starting with the end in mind, again, you want to look at those KPIs that we are going to be driving toward, and that will help build that structure for your whole campaign.
And let's make a quick pause. We have 60 people online with us. I'm just wondering, guys, what's your role? Please type in the Zoom chat. Are you in marketing, in sales, or maybe you are CEO running a company, client success? Type your function in chat. I just want to understand what's the proportion between marketing and sales. Cross marketing, CMO, sales, demand gen, marketing and sales. I love when people wear two hats, right? It's just honestly a very tough position to be in charge of both marketing and sales, but it's just, I can respect that you are dealing with it. Marketing growth, cool. Thanks a lot for sharing. So I believe that you guys, you all will benefit from this conversation here in this sales perspective. So coming back to these playbooks, who do you think should be in charge of creating a specific playbook? Should it be marketing? Should be a sales? Or basically, who should own the playbook?
It's a very important point. I also want to make with another quote here. I worked with a business coach years ago, and when I was in a leadership position, she talked about this concept of incorporating my team in the decisions and the creation of our strategies. So people endorse what they co-create. There needs to be equal partnership between sales and in marketing when you're looking at the actual playbook execution and creation. And diving into some of the actual parts of the playbook itself, it's going to traverse the whole of selecting your list of accounts, assuming that you already have an ICP created, and going through and creating the content based off of those KPIs for your specific goal of the business need that you're trying to meet. And so when we're just looking at this first step of this, one of the things that I like to share is not just my way or the highway, but there's levels of good, better, and best with each of these. So if you're trying to determine ICP and you're early on in ABM, you might look first at the recent wins within your company. You might start to filter by some of those firmographic, technographic, psychographic points, and then look for the commonalities to build your inclusion criteria. And as we talked about, again, on our last conversation, Andre, it is just as important to look at your exclusion criteria. Look at your losses. Look at the deals that might have closed, but took 4 times longer and 4 times the resources to close, because maybe those are not the way that you want to start launching ABM, because so many of us marketers need to show that we're moving the needle, and we don't have time necessarily for those companies and those accounts that are going to spin the wheels because they're just not that perfect fit for us. And really the best from here is, how do you build in some of that ICP scoring into your CRM, into your database that you're constantly using? That way, when you have new accounts that start to surface from an intent signal or come through an event that you have, and you have a net new company, you can very quickly in real time run it through this ICP criteria that works so well. Moving from there, the target account list, it is this step of bringing sales along the journey. So good would be marketing looks at this report, they start to create the ICP, they enable sales, here's what we did. Better is they are enabling sales and starting to get some feedback from them or letting them choose some of the accounts. And obviously the best is back and forth the whole time. Marketing shows, here's our exercise that we did on ICP, here's what we learned. They solicit feedback from sales, who offers more pieces that you could look at, or maybe things that you haven't thought of yet. And then they go and do the ICP exercise again, so they can really get to that co-creation of ABM accounts.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I believe this is a co-creation because generally speaking, sales talks to clients, right? They collect major insights. And it's really important also to have this review not only of the deals that you won, but also the lost deals, because then you can find the commonalities, right? And there could be multiple reasons. Let's say you generated an opportunity with account that fits your ICP based on firmographics criteria, right? So the geography, team size, revenue, whatever it is, doesn't really matter. But then let's say you're a small organization, right? And you generated an enterprise account. And there are lots of things to be considered. And first of all is a risk of bringing a small unknown vendor, right? I have heard, I forgot who said this, but there was literally a great quote. Nobody got fired for bringing IBM, right? Or McKinsey or whoever. So the well-known vendors, well-known, respected agencies. But if you bring an unknown vendor, nobody have heard, right? And then the project fails, then you are in trouble. So these are the things quite, and where I'm leading with this, that when you have this analysis and a frank conversation between marketing and sales, right, on the real, let's say, or the root reasons of losing specific deals, then you'll avoid, you'll have a good list of disqualification criteria, and you avoid the most common mistake, creating a wish list. Just because you want to sell to Apple, Microsoft, I don't know, Google, Adobe, anybody, any other enterprise account doesn't really mean that they are willing to buy from you, right? So this is one of the most important things that I believe we all need to keep in mind. By the way, let me quickly ask our community where you guys are joining us from. I'm calling from Split, Croatia. Jim, where are you located?
I am in Indianapolis, Indiana, so right in the middle of the US.
Yeah, and where you guys are from, let us know. Also Indianapolis, cool. So you have a neighbor, Western Canada, Cambridge, Barcelona, Houston, London, Romania, Spain, Belgium, London, Manchester, DC, India, Novi Sad, Serbia, my neighbors, Atlanta, Western Canada, cool. So we have again, a year ago when we started live full funnel podcast, we had, of course, European audience dominated, but I'm really happy to see that we have a good, healthy proportion between all the continents, which again makes me happy that we have an international community and also international experience here. Thanks a lot for sharing, guys. So let's move forward. I believe the next step is when you nail down these two steps, right? The next step is how exactly we are going to run the campaign, right? This is the playbook that, again, this leads us to co-creation. So how exactly we're going to achieve the goals, and you shared 5 different campaigns. They have different goals and different metrics, but traditionally, and especially with pilot campaigns, I might be wrong here. I would love to hear your experience, but quite often when companies want to build ABM motion and launch a pilot ABM program, they always think about net new revenue. Basically, prove me that it works, right? Generate me some opportunities, like you shared on the quote on the slide. So in this case, how would you co-create the playbook? and create actually the ABM campaign.
So the next step after looking into some of the accounts, and we had teased this out kind of before this episode, we want to be able to personalize. And we are far beyond a decade ago where personalization was inserting a token to have a company's name. We are now in a world where people are inundated with messages and it is hard to cut through the noise. It's also important in this to do something that is scalable, because from my experience, I came from kind of the field marketing background into ABM, and there are others that come from demand gen into ABM, looking at this as a demand gen 2.0, where we're still going to target thousands of accounts. We're just going to be slightly more personalized, and that could be very expensive, and you could still not cut through the noise. But we also have a different group of people coming from a one-to-one approach, talking to companies that are spending $100,000 a year on one account because they're so meaningful to that company. And so this push to ABM is, how do we personalize and how do we scale? So the personalization of some of the messaging in this, the goal is show me that you know me, right? And if you've seen this episode of this Mickey Mouse Christmas, here is one where they are both buying each other an item that the other one needs, but they had to sell, in Mickey's case, he had to sell his harmonica to buy the necklace that would match what Minnie had. Minnie sold her jewelry to buy the case for the harmonica, but it is this level of, I know you and I know what's most important to you. And when we look at ABM and marketing, we're trying to look at showing these individuals, not with a token, and I know what your name is, but some of this, account research. How do we go from a place of, I'm going to look at an account, to I'm going to deliver a message that's going to cut through the noise? So I created a different a kind of visual to your visual that you posted on LinkedIn the other day, but the steps are all the same. For me, when I go through account research, I start with uploading my top accounts into LinkedIn Sales Navigator. They have a great tool there to show you when individuals have switched companies. They also have now added over this past year some intent, specifically, and what they mean by intent is, when are these companies researching your company? When are they engaging with your company's content on LinkedIn, coming to your company's page? And how do we leverage some of that for knowing the timing is right? Google alerts are going to be on kind of the opposite side, and you can kind of see down at the annual report for P&G. If you're looking at 10K reports, if you're looking at PR, you're going to find top goals, top initiatives of these companies, which is a really, really great place to start with being able to personalize. And moving from an account level where you understand the business, then you can go down to the buyer level, looking at podcasts that they're on, looking at the things that they post on LinkedIn or engage with on LinkedIn. And again, Sales Navigator is good for surfacing a lot of that at scale. But even if you don't have Sales Navigator, I had talked with a CEO of an insurance company in Northern Indiana, and he was telling me, Jim, I get over 100 different pieces of outreach every single day, and I will just delete all of them in a mass bulk. But I really care about my personal brand. And if you come to me on LinkedIn through my content, if you leave meaningful comments to the posts showing me that you've actually read it, I will respond. It might not be a yes, but I will respond to you, because that showing me that personal branding is important to me, engaging with my content at a personal level. We always talk about impressions in the sense of an advertisement that somebody saw. But every time you talk to somebody, you're creating an impression. Every time you engage with them online, you're creating an impression. So why not make all of these little deposits to their personal brand and what they care about, so that when the time comes for them to have a campaign and to be in market, you already have a relationship established. The value proposition mapping can come through a number of different sources. The points that I want to make are looking at specifics with Google Analytics and where they're at on your website, and if they've hit certain pages, that can really indicate, for a company like ours, we have a huge variety of products, from advertising, email signature banners, chatbot, web personalization. Just because somebody lands on Terminus's website, it does not give me enough information as a salesperson to know what message I should lead with. So looking at what is the journey on our website, and if you haven't thought of starting to segment or group pages on your website to indicate a specific interest in a product or a pain point, that would be a really good next step on this. And then the last place is, through a gong, through Zoom recordings, through interviews with your sales team, you can start to understand what are those frequently asked questions that these companies keep bringing up in meetings, because those frequently asked questions are going to be your single greatest point of content creation. And so one of the things that I have done, and this I got from a sales trainer, John Barrows, is create this priority matrix. You can literally go through and type in top CFO priorities 2023. And this is from a few years ago, so ignore the 2023 part, but you can see executing on strategy, growing in certain geographies. These are all really important to CFOs. If I'm leading with one of these messages, I'm already light years ahead of anyone else that's reaching out to this account in the same general batch and blast, spray and pray type approach. And when you start to look at an individual company or an individual within a company, mapping to that value prop that was mentioned in the PR. So the CFO is going to be leading an initiative for 2023, and here's kind of their role and responsibility. That gets you down to that one-to-one level that really is going to cut through the noise. From there, the personalized solution is going to be anything from your marketing automation that you set up with the nurture with cadences in these sales engagement tools like SalesLoft or Outreach, or some of the content that you're starting to create online, whether that's in a podcast, a microsite, or some kind of event, and then distributing on those different channels. There's a lot of different ways to look at that. And the kind of last point with this is ABM is not just advertising. And a lot of people get stuck because of the demand gen background in, I am going to only set up ads for these accounts, and ignoring the fact that direct mail might be the piece that cuts through because they see ads all the time, but when was the last time you got a package? And so considering all of the different channels, the goal of what we're trying to do is connect this account experience. So when they do get online and look at ads, it's the same message as when they're on LinkedIn, the same message as when they land on your website, and same message as when sales is reaching out to them. It can be very, very confusing trying to delineate between one brand and another if from this brand, from your company, they're seeing 4 different messages all at the same time. So map to what they're interested in now, what you've seen in your research, and that's what you want to be hitting them on with every single account.
I would love to summarize everything that you have shared so far, and just next ask for the feedback from folks. Was it clear? So there are fundamentals, right? I would say that ICP, this is like kind of fundamental exercise you must have. It doesn't matter if you want to build account-based marketing motion or no, it's just like essential for any B2B company to have a clear ideal customer profile that consists of 5 pillars, right? Firmographics, buying committee structure, account enrichment with the typical buyer journey, next tier segmentation, because not all companies were created equal, even if they fit, right, your firmographics. And next, account qualification and disqualification, something that we have discussed. This is extremely important to have. Next is account list building, and the approach may vary depending on the ABM campaign you plan to launch, right? And the goal, because it would be different for net new revenue and expansion or retention campaign, right? Because expansion and retention are done for the existing clients. Next, you have seen the research cascade, as I call it, and basically the process consists of collecting the insights about target accounts first, right? The key initiatives, goals, needs, etc. Next, narrowing down into and focusing on the actual buyers, on the buying committee members, right? Reviewing their KPIs, areas of responsibility, goals, and needs, and just start. And the next step is mapping out your value proposition, right? So how exactly, considering everything that you have learned so far on the account level and on the individual buyer level, how exactly you can help this specific buyer, how they can benefit from your product. This is the prerequisite of account-based marketing, right? As you guys see, that you need to dive deeply and create personalized solutions. So that's the first thing. I don't believe that much in one-to-many in account-based marketing. One-to-many is, for me, a lazy substitute of not doing appropriate demand generation, right? Account-based marketing stands for personalized solutions, and you can do one-to-one or one-to-few, right? Where you personalize on job role and vertical level. So this is that's really important to keep in mind. And next steps in the playbook, right? Next steps we have is what we call warm-up and activation. How can we create awareness inside target accounts, inside the buying committee, right? So they could become aware of our brand and our solution and this personalized solution. I deliberately don't call it pitch, right? Because it's not like kind of elevator pitch that you can brainstorm and then send to all the accounts. It's a personalized solution, right? And next, how we're going to distribute this. And there are, ideally, if you have a healthy mix of different, let's say, channels and tactics to deliver this message. And I would love to hear your feedback, guys. Share with me in the chat if the process is clear so far. Type plus, minus, just want to hear your feedback. Awesome. Thanks
Wonderful.
a lot, guys. Jim, did I summarize it well?
Yeah, definitely. The one point I will make is this is oftentimes a massive undertaking for going through and doing the research on one account. And I am all about trying to make the most of every opportunity. So one of the things that we talk about sometimes with these companies that invest so heavily in one-to-one, definitely do that. That is it will always cut through the noise. You'll be able to personalize beyond any other kind of messaging that they will get, but don't leave it just to that one account. If you can level up a little bit, if I'm going after David Smalley at IT, in the IT department at Apple, I know he's the VP of IT. This is the person that could be buying from me. I'm going to do all this research on his top priorities, but you would think that other enterprise tech companies will probably have similar pains that he will have. Then why don't we depersonalize, maybe take just the word Apple out, or maybe just one of the specific initiatives that is dedicated to him. And we can now expand that across our enterprise tech companies. You talk a lot with your model of having your 10 accounts for your pilot. And if we can expand just to those 10 accounts to run that, we can find the messages that are really resonating. And so when you look at, some of the creation in these segments, you can start to look at some of the data that we talked about for the segment creation, but then also this ability to scale personalization through some of these static and dynamic filters. So we're starting to change the messaging, not just because we know David at Apple, but based off of what is the opportunity stage. We need to move eventually from what is, in our case, Terminus, to here are case studies with hard ROI numbers that help make the case for this initiative that we know that he's working on. And so that's the goal of what we're trying to do, is not just map the messaging to the individual, but also to meet them what they're at in the education or interest or buying journey.
And if you don't mind, I would love to share that diagram with the research cascade, so folks will see the. I also want to share the practical implementation of it, right? I believe it just makes sense also to see the real example. So this is what we have discussed, and you have seen it when Jim was sharing his slides, right, with the main stages and the stack. And generally speaking, when it comes to account research, right, this is one of the most ignored stages. But this is essential to have this level of personalization. So when it comes to account research, you need to look, depending, of course, on whom you are selling to, right? You need to look at roadmaps if these are tech companies, right? You can look at press releases. You can look at key initiatives, especially if you are selling to enterprise companies. You can listen to earnings calls and corporate statements where they can mention their key initiatives and strategy. You can listen to interview with stakeholders or analyze the posts that the company might share on social. Next, you dive deeply into the buying committee, right? And you know, traditionally we have, there could be a discussion if there are 4 roles or more roles in the buying committee. It doesn't really matter. We usually look at 4 core roles: champions, decision makers, influencers, and blockers, right? These are 4 categories of people that somehow influence our opportunity. And what we want to do is basically to look at their role and area of responsibility, their KPIs, their goals, and their potential challenges. And Jim nailed it down with the example from Apple, right? If you know that this, and because sometimes we won't be able to find this information, so we can look at this, let's say you are prospecting a specific account, right? Then you, let's say your decision maker or your influencer is VP of IT. And then you find this guy on LinkedIn and he has an empty profile. Basically, you don't have any information. So the guy said, basically what is mentioned in his profile that he works 25 years for this company as VP of IT, and that's it, right? Doesn't say a lot, doesn't give us a field for personalization. But when we know that this is exactly the same person as another person we have researched so far, we can collect these insights and try to use them here. And next is these personalized solutions and distribution. So there was a question about what is the healthy mix, right? The healthy, probably the most appropriate answer would be you need to understand the buying journey, the channels your buyers are using for the research, for professional education, right? Where do they gain the insights? Where do they collect insights from? Where do they interact with their peers? Not only, I'm not saying only about the buying process, right? But also I'm talking about top of the funnel, where you basically can attract their attention. So think about it, and then you can run ads, you can do direct mail, as Jim mentioned, social engagement and silent, micro events, content hubs, etc. There are lots of solutions, but the answer would be look and or even better, talk to your customers, run in-depth customer interviews to understand the buying process. And maybe staff who joined us today from our team, from Full Funnel IO team, can share a link in the chat where you can learn more about that process. But what I wanted to share with you is a practical approach. So when you collect the insights on account level and then the buying committee level, and I would love also to hear your feedback, Jim, if you have similar approach, maybe some tips how that process can be improved. So let's look at this example, right? What we usually look at is basically this is the company, right? Next, we discuss why did we select this account, just to avoid again creating a wish list of companies. So we look, there was an engagement, they consumed one of the cornerstone content pillars. In this case, just don't mind leveraging WhatsApp, right? Our SDR had conversation with 2 people from that company. What are the signs that this company might have a need in our product? They have repetitive projects, checking how to improve WhatsApp communication. And these are the intent signals, right, we have seen on our website. And then account insights. And this is what we can collect from the sources that I have mentioned, right? From public press releases, from search, interviews, corporate statements, etc. So lots of that stuff we collect here, right, about their key initiatives, projects, etc. And you can see the core links, right? And next, the personalization. So this is the guy who is a managing director. He is a decision maker. And the next step, what we are doing is that we analyze his profile and we look at his KPIs, right? Deliver projects on time with the approved budget, people performance plus retention, right? Quality to avoid after costs. So the challenges that this guy might face, right? And this is one of the projects that this account wants to run. So meet the expectations, delivery budget and deadlines of the East-West Railway Alliance, right? Avoid injuries of your team, facilitate the collaboration, get live on-site project. And next, we map out the value our product provides, right? And we map it with the KPI and challenges. Get a shareable on-site live view of your project and stay on track with each team's progress at every stage. Keep your project safe. Boom, boom, boom. Next, replace WhatsApp, get full alignment, etc. Personalization insights. The guy is from Manchester, and probably I have seen that we have a couple of people from Manchester, right? And if you guys are not in football, just to give you an idea that in Manchester, probably everybody is a football fan, and they either support Manchester United, the Red Devils, or Manchester City. And just not to make a mistake, you need to understand who this person supports. So after a quick search, we found him on Twitter sharing a picture with his young son wearing Manchester United's t-shirt. So for us, it was a fantastic insight that we can use in personalization, right? And the gift idea. So we wanted to purchase Manchester United jersey, right, to send as the gift. And this is exactly the idea of what we want to deliver next, how the personalized solution looks like, right? So we talk about the key initiative, the project, etc. As you can see, we make parallels with Red Devils, with Manchester United. And next, give the context, right? So considering your recent win of the East-West Rail contract, you'll definitely need to boom, boom, boom. So basically, as you can see, sharing the challenges that we mapped out here on the research level. And next, we explain how we can help, right? And present the custom solution, present the personalized solution that is coming from here. And this is what we call the personalized solution. The next step is basically how we can deliver them. So wondering, Jim, how would you, if you'd make any tweaks to this process, what are your best practices here? How do you like that approach?
Yeah, it's very similar to how we do it, organizing in a Google sheet, going from account level down to individual level. The one piece that we add on is looking at your buying cycle. Typically, different roles will be introduced at different points in your buying cycle. And one of the things when I was a director of marketing, I looked at where are the bottlenecks? So yes, it is great to get more leads, but if we're focusing on growing the company, or focusing on revenue, take a look at the times in your sales cycle where deals start to slow down. And there might be one of these roles, Andre, where they don't ever see anything from your business until it's time for the deal to close. And you don't want them to be asking, who is full funnel when that contract lands on the desk? You don't want to be asking when they have to go through a security review or a legal review, or if in our case, a lot of times we'll start with marketing and then sales gets brought in at some point. I don't want that calendar invite to come over to the salesperson without him or her already knowing who Terminus is. And so it is great when you think of the execution of one of these strategies to also include the point in the sales cycle where they start to come, because typically, and one of the guests on my podcast mentioned this as well, you want to have a 2 to 3 week lead time So if it is 2 to 3 weeks before they would have the meeting, that's when you should target them. If it's a net new deal and you want to start to generate that interest, should be 2 or 3 weeks of them seeing some sort of marketing message to warm up the account, so that when sales calls in, they're actually picking up the phone, they're responding to emails, and they're starting to answer. The other piece too that I think is really helpful, if you're trying to understand what messaging resonates, or if you're a little bit strapped, because I know we're all strapped for cash in 2023, you want an easy way of creating an event that is meaningful. I stole this idea from one of my peers, but we ran these roundtables. So take the individual that you sell to and find a bunch of their peers. I think it's always good to have a mix of customers and prospects together. Sometimes your customers are just so excited they can't help but talk about your business, and that's great. But the point of the meeting is not sales. The point of the meeting is for each of those individuals, because we're all remote and we're all trying to figure it out, share your top concern or your top point of interest on this call. And I use a website, slide.io. Everybody will put in their top concern today, and then you can upvote on people's top questions or concerns. We'll give them the mic for 30 seconds to clarify, and then we literally set a 5-minute timer, and anybody who wants to can jump in and offer advice. Here's what we're doing. Here's a practical example. You move on to the next one after that 5 minutes. The goal is not that you solve all the problems. For you as a company, you're collecting, here's the list of top problems and pain points that we need to address. For the community that shows up to the event, they're saying, Andre made a really great point, and I want to learn more. Let me grab coffee with him after this event to talk more about this. So it's a win-win for both sides, where you're getting good content, you're making a meaningful experience for them, and they feel like you are being helpful and not just looking at them as potential dollar signs.
Cool, thank you. One of the things that I would love to ask you, I think that we nailed it down successfully. I mean, the playbook, right? One of the questions that we still have, and I would love to get your perspective here. You are in sales. How do you believe marketing should support you? What kind of help you'd like to regularly get from marketing?
Yeah, there are a couple points to this. So one, looking at the state of economy that we're in right now, Marketing Week just shared this, going into potential recession in some countries, typically there's the 95-5 rule. Only 5% of your total addressable market is going to be in market, but that is shifting more toward 1 and 99% right now. So starting to look at future buyers, I think there's two things from marketing to do that would help. One is there are so many companies out there that are preaching, intent signals, reach out when the time is right. But if we're talking 1% of your market is only going to be showing those intent signals because they're buying right now, you need to start looking at how do we move to a proactive rather than a reactive model. So instead of waiting for intent signals being the yellow, where we're just focusing on demand capture, how do we be the green? Because if it's going to be 24 months before somebody purchases, how do we build up that brand equity? How do we make our company a thought leader and build that trust so we are top of mind when the timing is right? And the way that this should really look, instead of starting from behind and looking like we're only interested because we know they want to buy, and also jumping in when a flood of other companies are, how do we look at this as shifting from demand creation to demand capture when the timing is right? And so I like to think about the different sources for signals and how sales and marketing communicate. It is hard to get a full picture with just one color. So the companies that are saying, hey, our intent source is the best and you need it, it's great, but it's still going to be one color, right? And I think there are a lot of places to look at for intent. Are you looking at third party? Are you looking at first party? Is it compliant? How is this data being gathered? Just a few intent sources that I've used in the past. But more importantly, what is that, kind of ICP that you can start to create? So what is the best content on the website? What does sales tell you has the best reaction with your marketing content? And what are you seeing those surges on online? So as you look at some of these accounts and you're looking at potentially, the way that sales and marketing would work together, we're looking at how do we start to reduce this friction in this communication back and forth. Because if you've ever asked sales for a list of accounts to invite to an event and they don't do it, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
If there's too much friction, sales just doesn't take action. And so the way that we work, we have these weekly emails that automatically are delivered to sales. I don't have to go anywhere for these. I don't have to learn a new system or log in somewhere. We also surface these pieces of intent and interest on the website and online outside of people even knowing who our company is. So I can go, again, within the CRM on the account page and find this and look not just at the high level, but also the specific contact level. And this gets into, one of the stories I wanted to tell. I coined this term when I was at my last job and trying to get sales buy-in, but it's something that I talk about a lot on calls now that always piques the interest. It is this concept of engineering serendipity. So when we've done all this account research, when we know what is a priority, we make this timing perfect when we start to see research being done and we reach out to them. Keeping in mind, this should be on both sides. They see marketing messages and they also see from sales. Here's an example with a company. I just said, as a head of marketing, I imagine you're looking for better ways of measuring. Now, I'm not saying I got a signal saying that you're interested. I don't want to be creepy, but I want this serendipitous moment to occur where you can see an hour and a half later, he's ready to hop on a call. And it's not because this is the world's best email. It's because it is perfect timing with these signals coming over. So surfacing signals to sales is so important, but also looking at the individual that might be interested. Because if you're going after an enterprise company and they have 50 senior levels in their IT department, that's not helpful for me to know that they're showing interest in the IT department, because I have no idea which of those 50 people to go after, and that's too much friction. But if I can go into a call and explain to him that, hey, we had a report and he saw that we saw that he was showing intent, so we reached out. This is one where I had the first, essentially first right of refusal on this account, because he was so impressed with our speed to reach out to him when that timing was right. And it's the whole idea of, I know what you're interested in. I'm going to reach out and I'm going to start at a high level talking exactly about what you're interested in, so they think the stars are aligning.
So generally speaking, the role of marketing is creating awareness and ideally generating demand, right? And then the next step is looking at the accounts that are hitting specific engagement threshold and sourcing these accounts to the ABM team, where you can proceed with the steps that we have discussed, right? You do additional research, you dive deeply into the buying committee, and that was a perfect example of outreach. And as we also shared with Jim, ideally, if you have like a healthy mix of different activities to further warm up and activate these accounts, not just only email outreach, right, or automated email cadence, but it could be a social engagement. That was like a perfect example Jim shared. So come to the visit the profile, look at the recent post, right, or comment, engage with that comment, share, ask a question, or share your point of view, share your expertise, move that conversation to the inbox. Again, an additional point, right? At the same time, marketing can start targeting these accounts with additional content, right? You can run the ads targeting this account and sharing. For example, if we look at this specific case study that you have shared, so head of marketing is interested in how to prove the efficiency of ABM programs, right? So potentially what we can do is if we have a like we have podcast right now, live podcast, we can potentially cut out a clip, right, explaining how to measure ABM, or maybe we have a good post with ABM dashboard explaining the metrics. We also have had the slides today, right? What are the right metrics to track in account-based marketing programs? And that could be additional targeting. At the same time, right, marketer can reach out or tag that specific head of marketing in the post, right, on social, say, hey, thoughts, would love to hear your thoughts, right? If we know these insights, right, we can tag that person in the comments to post about measuring ABM. So would love to hear your feedback. And that's additional non-sales touch that can attract attention of that person. I'm not saying that it's like a silver bullet, just do this, right, and you'll generate opportunities. But this is like what we are saying. You need to have a healthy mix and a good collaboration between marketing and sales. You got this insight, this account fits your ICP, this account fits your account qualification criteria, right? You know that this account belongs to tier 1 or tier 2, right? And then you proceed with this manual engagement. And how you would do it, right? I share it with you one example. So if you want, you can move with direct mail swag, which is like 100% personalized solution, right, to that specific person. Or it could be more, let's say, one-to-few approach that is aligned around the role and the traditional challenges these people might face in their role. So you decide, but this is actually how the playbook looks like. Quick question.
The other,
go ahead.
Oh, there's one more piece to add in here. When you look at some of the pieces that marketing is doing, it is always top of mind for marketers to prove their value. But somebody that is paid off of whether or not they're closing deals, they are always going to be geared toward those revenue generating activities. So expecting sales to go through every piece of marketing content that you've created and understand it inside and out and know when to pull it up is asking too much. And I know that when I was in marketing, I did not like that sentiment. I wanted them to be excited because of how much work I was doing. But we see this all the time, especially in marketing when it comes to social. The accounts that I'm following, and I'm following a lot of marketers, the only thing that they're doing is hitting the repost button on LinkedIn when their company posts something. And people don't follow brands, they follow individuals. And so the best thing that you could do from a sales marketing alignment perspective, highlight those key points, highlight those insights, the stats that will stand out or the story that stands out for a salesperson, so that when they go online, they're not just hitting repost. They're saying, here's what I got out of this. Here's the top insight. And that will let them know when to bring that up in the sales cycle. Now, for a salesperson, they also need to be bringing this feedback back to marketing, because they hear in the meetings with prospects and customers, here's what resonates. Here's what the pain points are. Somebody said that they saw this piece of content and it went over really well. And moving to a point of having that consistency in communication, but also understanding the prospect's words and the customer's words of how they describe their pain. I one of those people that got my ego tied into the campaigns that I was creating, thinking that I was some lyrical genius in the words that I would create. And I had to eat a slice of humble pie in realizing that the way that I was describing a problem was not the same way that a customer was describing the problem and why they were working with us. So I ended up having to go back and retool some of my content using different language. And it is amazing. I mean, 25% lift overnight from just using some of the words that they would use over the words that I would. Because again, we're going back to this, show me that you know me, and using the same description of the pain point or the solution is one of the best ways to do that.
Thank you. Love it. We almost crossed 1 hour, and I'm wondering, guys, how did you like this episode? Was it helpful? Was it insightful? Did you learn something new? Share with us your feedback, please, in the chat. curious to hear. And I would give you one insight. So as you know, every year we host our annual full funnel summit. So this year, Jim joins us as speaker. So the first full funnel summit will be hosted the last week of March. So stay tuned. We'll soon share the invites. The summit is free as always, so you're all welcome to it. And it's virtual. Yeah, I forgot to say it's virtual, so you can prepare your favorite beverage. And yeah, it just reminded me about your podcast, Jim. So account-based beverages, yeah. So and listen to the best practitioners in the space. Yeah, follow account-based beverages 100%. I still drink the coffee that Jim sent me as a gift, so which was another example of account-based marketing in action. Yeah, so highly recommend to follow his podcast. And yeah, guys, thanks a lot for the feedback. Appreciate it. Loved it. One of the best episodes. Appreciate your feedback. If you don't mind, this year we want to double down on Spotify. I'm dropping a link to our Spotify channel. If you can give us 5 stars and share your feedback, you can simply copy and paste what you have shared in the chat. That would mean a lot and help us to boost our podcast presence. So would be very grateful. Or if you don't use Spotify, at least make a tweet or LinkedIn post tagging us. That would be a really great help. Thanks a lot. And we have a couple of questions from community. Lots of them we have covered. I'm just sharing my screen. One of the questions, Jim, I would love to ask you, aside from these questions, what is the #1 opportunity that you have generated from account-based marketing campaign that you are really proud of?
Yeah, so going back to the idea that this is not just about ads, and it's not just about reducing friction for the salesperson, but how do sales and marketing work together to reduce friction for the buyer? We had a pharmaceutical company that I was working with last year, and they were in a rush when we first started seeing spikes and reaching out and starting conversations. And the way that we were able to win this deal was through reducing that friction. So I mentioned we have a chat solution. We have the ability to drop a link somewhere where somebody can pull up the chat. Now, if you don't have budget for an expensive chat solution, texting works just as well. But being okay getting on that texting relationship early on. I mean, it's 2023 and most people are okay with it, but most people are not willing to ask still for a number to just check in quickly. The problem comes in so many sales cycles, especially now that the CFO is going to be involved in so many evaluations. Buyers don't know how to sell your product. They don't know all the answers to the questions about your product or service. And so if they are in a pitch to their senior leadership team and they get a question, they're probably going to be unprepared for how to answer that. Now, if you have, in my case, it was our Chat from Anywhere solution, which links directly to my Slack, and it looks like a DM. They're sending me questions. I'm responding with answers, and I can make them look good in front of their executive team because it's not a, let me look into this, let me get back to you later. Executives are busy. They don't have time to schedule another meeting later. Getting the answer now, reducing the friction so that they can be able to sell internally. Anytime you can open up those types of channels for faster communication, less formal. I have a quick question and it's late at night and we're in 2 different time zones. I get some of those. I'm in the backyard playing with the kids and I need to answer something really quickly. When you can kind of break the normal cycle of everything has to be formal, everything has to be a scheduled Zoom meeting, being able to get the questions to that team when they were pitching to their executive team and their board, that was the easiest piece for us to move past the hardest part of the sales cycle, which was the internal sell, and enabling them with the words that we knew worked for other deals that came through. That is one of the ones I'm most proud of.
Love it. Thank you. So just to wrap it up, I know that we're out of time, but just would love to pick two really good questions from the list of questions our community submitted. I think most of them we have covered, but one is really good, and I would love to hear your feedback. So Emmanuel asks how to make a business case when senior leaders in the business don't see ABM as a proper tool versus the old way of prospecting. Basically, how to get buy-in from senior leadership for account-based marketing.
Yeah, this comes back to something I talk about. I'm very passionate about. There are a lot of people, and it's a very common thing online, especially, to say this channel is dead. All right, its email is dead, or print. If you're familiar with this image, we used to have the yellow pages here in the States, and it was a phone book where you could look through businesses, and nothing is dead. Just some things are overpriced. And so I am a data-driven marketer at heart. I always go back to the data first. And a lot of times when you see resistance from executives, it comes from a place of mystery and a lack of clarity. So if you can go in, and I would look at every single one of your channels, from, we have an outbound channel with BDRs or SDRs. How many do we have? What are we paying them per hour? How many opportunities are they generating, and how many of those become revenue? You can actually calculate the return on investment of those outbound folks. You can do the same with your trade shows. You can do the same with your advertising, and start to look at how do you, and I'm obsessed with opportunity cost, how do you shift some of the money over from one column to another? There was a company I talked to that was spending $750,000 going to trade shows every year. And for them, and it's different for every company, but for them, they're in a position where they didn't have a lot of meetings set up before those trade shows. They were going and standing at a booth. People are stopping by and grabbing their swag and getting scanned and moving. Now, your takeaway from this trade show is a list of 200 names. Maybe not even all of them remember you, but there's also 35 other companies that are putting them on a cadence for the next 2 weeks, and then they're going to drop off and never hear from you again. And so when you start to break down the ROI of each of the channels, that helps make the case for, here in ABM, and I'll clarify, especially since I work for Terminus, you do not have to have a technology to run ABM. There are great platforms out there that help you scale. I was part of a 2-person marketing team when I was running Terminus. I was in the platform. Somebody else was helping with the graphic design. You don't have to have a big team with tech, but there are ways of doing this without technology. I mean, LinkedIn is a great resource for reaching out to people and connecting with them and learning about them. And once you start to understand some of the ROI of the channels, then you can understand which are the areas that we're going to start to test. And one of my friends, 𝐀𝐜𝐬𝐿𝐴, always says you need to have that, what he calls a slush fund of marketing, where you can take the money, you can do whatever you want. He's done some really crazy things, like make a board game for his old company, write a book, send people to events. But you start to see, when you test these new things, because marketing is all about testing, what works really, really well and what you should put more money into after you've tested with small pilot groups.
We actually had Kyle on our podcast a year ago, so exactly at that time, so you guys can find an episode on Spotify as well. Was really, really cool episode where he shared a lot of these tactics. So I would also emphasize on conversion. You can always look at how many opportunities you convert from these activities, right? If you do like cold outbound, how many basically how many contacts you need to approach, right, to generate at least one meaningful conversation, at least one meaningful reply. Lots of these things you can look at these trade shows, conference booths, right? All of that stuff you can compare. Also, it just reminded me about conversation with Fran Lemke, head of demand gen at 𝐀𝐜𝐬𝐿𝐴, and she shared how 𝐀𝐜𝐬𝐿𝐴 shifted from lead gen to demand generation because they sat down with stakeholders and with sales, and they used all these obsolete playbooks like gated content and webinars where they pitched the product, right? And then sales follow up with everybody. And then she said that they analyzed everything, and they saw that they needed at least 500 of so-called MQLs to generate at least one demo, and this demo could be converted into real opportunity in a time frame of 6 to 9 months, which absolutely wasn't scalable, right? It seems scalable on the paper because you can run more of these tactics, you don't need more sales resources, it's a shortcut, it's a linear funnel, right? But generally speaking, it's not scalable at all when you look at the actual numbers, right? That's a solid point. And the last question I would love to ask you, I believe this is really a good one. What strategies would you recommend when entering a completely new geography market? And if you, let's say, if you are running ABM, would you make some shifts, right, from your global ABM strategy?
Yeah. And I'm going to tie in one point from the last. When you're measuring, don't just look at the number of opportunities, but how far do those go through the pipeline? You know, Refine Labs talks a lot about what they call high ROI or high intent revenue opportunity, but is there are there opportunities that you're creating that make it through to revenue? Is there a more than 25% chance that they're closing, or are they just opportunities that fizzle out right away? And I think this is a great place to look at when you're expanding to new markets. Going back to the ICP and going back to some of those pieces of personalization with account research, it is definitely a great exercise to start with a one-to-one and understand at a deep level what works for these individuals, but also starting to understand you need to have conversations with people in that geography and hop on calls with them and just try to fact find. Because there was a manufacturing company out of New Zealand I was working with last year, and they have a tool for food processors, and in some areas of the world, they're processing beef, but in other areas, they're processing lamb. And you would think an image of beef versus lamb wouldn't have that big of an impact, but it absolutely does. And so if there are different shifts that you need to make to be more contextually relevant to that geography, the way that you're going to find that out and learn that is through having conversations with people in that geography. So start from your ICP exercise, start looking at that high intent revenue, and then move over to how do we start to apply this within this new geography.
Love it. Thanks a lot for sharing. And actually, this episode broke another myth when people say that they don't listen to the long podcast episodes. Actually, we spent more than 1 hour together, and still we have more than 30 people listening to us. So thanks a lot, Jim. Thanks a lot, guys, for tuning in. Thanks a lot for great engagement and questions. Next week, we are going to share our account-based marketing strategy framework. So obviously we couldn't discuss everything today, but I believe you learned a lot about practical development of account-based playbooks, both from marketing and sales perspective, with a look on marketing and sales alignment. Next week, we'll share with you a process how we'll look at developing ABM strategy. I dropped a link to sign up for that event. Again, as always, it's free. So looking forward to seeing all of you next Thursday. And Jim, thanks a lot for joining me. It was a brilliant chat. I'm super excited about our next engagement at Full Funnel Summit.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Thank you. Take care, guys. Have a great rest of the week. Cheers. See you in 1 week.
Cheers.